The concrete inferno. The winter air was bitter enough to cut through bone, and the city's ruins echoed with a cacophony of war. My fingers were stiff around the handle of the MG42, though the heat of its barrel was a grim comfort against the frostbite gnawing at me. This weapon was my lifeline, my anchor in a city that had become hell on earth. Our orders were clear. Hold the positions in the northern sector, an area reduced to a wasteland of shattered buildings and mangled steel. I crouched in the remnants of a bombed-out factory, the blackened walls providing scant protection from the snipers that hunted us like wolves. Every brick and shadow seemed alive, harboring unseen enemies who knew this terrain better than we ever could. I heard them before I saw them, the shouts in Russian, a language I didn't understand, but had come to associate with imminent death. Through the rubble, a wave of men surged forward, clad in tattered coats and wielding rifles, as if the cold couldn't touch them. My comrade Dieter shouted a warning, his voice cracking like the mortar fire overhead. The MG42 roared to life in my hands, its relentless bark slicing through the chaos. Bodies crumbled in the snow, but they kept coming, like ghosts, determined to drag us down to their icy graves. The gun jammed, my heart skipped, and I fumbled to clear the mechanism. Dieter covered me, his Kar-98 T-cap picking off soldiers until a grenade landed too close. The explosion hurled him backward, and when the dust settled, he wasn't moving. I wanted to scream, but there was no time. Another surge came, closer now, their bayonets glinting in the weak winter sun. I finished clearing the jam and let the MG42 speak again. The recoil rattled through me, the noise deafening, but the wave finally faltered. Blood soaked into the snow, staining it in obscene crimson. For a moment, silence reigned. I looked at Dieter's still form, then back at the horizon. There would be no reprieve. Chapter 2. The Rat's Nest. Days blurred into nights as we fought over every shattered brick of Stalingrad. The Soviets called it their motherland, and they defended it with a ferocity that defied reason. Our food was almost gone, our water frozen in canteens, but we had orders to hold. Our new position was in what had once been a tenement building, now a skeleton of its former self. I set up the MG42 near a blown-out window, the weapon a grim sentinel overlooking a courtyard littered with debris. Somewhere in the shadows, Russian soldiers lay in wait, just as cold and hungry as us. The firefights came in bursts. A single rifle crack would pierce the quiet, and then all hell would break loose. They attacked us in small groups, darting between cover like rats. My guns spat fury whenever they showed themselves, but the ammunition boxes were growing lighter. Once, a Molotov cocktail exploded near me, the fire licking at my boots as I scrambled to extinguish it. I hadn't slept in what felt like years. Even the sound of footsteps sent adrenaline surging through my veins. One night, I heard them climbing the building, boots scraping on stone, whispers in Russian. My squad was too spread out to call for help, so I stayed silent, my hands steady on the MG42. When they came into view, I squeezed the trigger. The bullets shredded the first two, but there were more, so many more. One threw a grenade, and I dived for cover as the blast tore apart the wall. Dust and blood filled the air. When I rose again, coughing and blinded, my comrades were gone. Either dead or retreating. I fought alone until reinforcements finally arrived, but the victory felt hollow. Stalingrad had a way of stealing your soul. Chapter 3. The White Abyss. By January, the snow was thicker, and the city was an unrecognizable graveyard. Supplies were non-existent, and we scavenged from the dead. The Soviets had encircled us. Retreat wasn't an option. The MG42 had become an extension of my body. I carried it through the ruins like a priest carries a cross, offering salvation to my squad or damnation to the enemy. On the final day of my personal war, the Soviets launched a massive offensive. Tanks rumbled through the streets, and their soldiers seemed endless. We were holed up in the theater, its grandeur reduced to ashen cinders. I set up the MG42 in the orchestra pit, aiming at the shattered entrance. The others barricaded the doors with whatever they could find. When the attack came, it was like the gates of hell had opened. The Russians charged in waves. My MG42 tore through them, the ammunition belt feeding relentlessly as I swiveled to meet each new threat. The barrel overheated, glowing faintly red, but I couldn't stop. They came from all directions, through windows and walls, their shouts drowning out the weapon's roar. A tank shell hit the building and the ceiling collapsed. I was thrown across the room, the MG42 wrenched from my hands. Dazed, I crawled through the rubble, my ears ringing. When I emerged, I saw the remnants of my squad surrendering. I dropped to my knees, the cold finally seeping through every layer of my being. The MG42 was gone, and with it, my purpose. As the Russians dragged me away, I glanced back at the city. Stalingrad had claimed everything, leaving nothing but snow and ash.